Okay, so today will be the fourth session of building a listing-based business. Of course, as I've probably said a few times on these recordings and in these meetings, that a real estate agent has the choice to build whatever type of business that they want. I will tell you that I chose to build a listing-based business based on a few things, probably two things that was very, very important. Number one, my methodology in decision making, my style in the way that I like to present an argument or a presentation of some at some level. I always default to logic. I learned over the years, and this might be something that just was, kind of like programmed as a child, but I learned over the years that you can win every argument if you base your argument on facts. Now, I use the term argument because it just hammers in and stresses a point. It's not necessarily that I want to argue with people. But if you live in my world and you're a family member or a friend or a real estate agent, just know that Greg Harrelson will have the facts and I will have done the research on the data, and I will probably present to you in a way that we can go back and forth and debate and give opinions, but there'll be some truths because it'll just be market data that we will not be able to deny. So, sellers like to sell and make their decisions off of logic. So they love that presentation style. Buyers make their decisions a lot of times off of emotion. We love the way that looks. We love the way that feels. We just think this is the perfect place to raise our family. Perfect based on what? Perfect based on it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath at 24 heated square feet, and it's got a large backyard, but maybe not perfect from the sense that it's outside of your budget and you're going to have to continue to work a part-time job to actually be able to make the payments. And let's pray that nothing ever happens to the economy or your job, because you could find yourself upside down. You see, like when somebody says this is the perfect home for us, typically they're describing it in a way that has to do a little bit more with emotional desires, emotional wants versus logic. Now, that being said, buyers making their decisions emotionally and sellers making their decisions logically is not good or bad. You and myself both make our decisions the exact same way. When we want something, usually emotion comes into play when we're looking to buy something. But when we're looking to sell, man, we go in and do our research and we find out what is it like. Let me take my son for an example. My son, he likes to, he's into vintage Star Wars. So like anything in 76, 77, in that range, he's all in. So when he's a buyer, the guy will just pay any price because he wants it. Actually, he wants the vintage toy. But he's also a flipper, meaning he buys vintage toys and he'll flip them on eBay. Now, when he's a seller, he goes into eBay, he'll look at like the exact vintage toy, the exact year, the same toy in very similar condition, and there's a filter in eBay where you can hit like, I only want to see all of the items that fit this description that have sold. So he can see every one that is sold. So when he's a seller, he always looks at that information. But when he's a buyer, he doesn't want to see that information, because that information could reveal that he's going to overpay for something, and therefore logic has to kick in, and then he doesn't get what he wants. I see this over and over. So obviously, as a father and teaching my son a lesson, anytime that he goes to buy something, he has to actually look at the sales to see what's the market value. But he doesn't naturally do that as a buyer. That's something we naturally do as a seller. So just remember that when you're dealing with sellers, logic, data, facts are really, really important. Opinions are also important, but the opinions on the listing side of the business, opinions are only important when you're giving them an opinion on what we need to do based on what facts we just looked at. So based on these facts, the price is this, and what the prices have been in the community, my opinion is we should do blank. If it was my property, I would do blank. So the opinion matters, but it's typically an opinion based on the facts that you presented, the logic that you presented, that will influence the seller. Very, very important. So I want to kind of break down for you today. We've touched on it in the last 3 sessions, but I kind of got it a little bit more organized for one call today, is breaking down the listing process. Okay, this is the process of getting listings. Some of you, by the way, are already, engaging in the process. I know some of you are working for sub-owners pretty aggressively, and you're involved in the process right now. But let me just break down the process. Step number 1 is you've got to prospect to get appointments. You've got to actually do some sort of activity to identify listing leads. So lead generation is step number 1 in the listing process. I mean, of course, the more people you talk to, the more appointments you set. And I take this through the beginning because we can talk about getting listings, but the reality is people who are building big listing businesses, as I've probably stated dozens of times, are the people that are generating enormous or large sums of listing leads. It's just a numbers game. Leads going in equal listings coming out. It just happens that way. So building a pipeline is critical with the listing business, because typically in the buyer side of the business, somebody, something, some technology, some realtor.com, something is providing leads to you. In the listing side of the business, you are typically providing listings to yourself. So when it comes to lead generation, we can, in the buyer side, we can leverage technology to generate leads for us. But in the listing side, you have to leverage yourself in order to generate listings, listing opportunities, or listing leads. Lead generation daily is the first step to building the pipeline. Of course, I'm not saying that you've got to call expireds or FSBOs or cold call. The teachings of peak performers, or the peak performance program, those working your COIs, those are lead generation strategies. So the key is doing it daily, staying on top of these things, building your database of past clients and centers of influence, and reacting to their activities when you see that they're doing things in our CRM, searching properties or looking at market reports. Those are things that should trigger you to make calls. That would be lead generation. I swear, Gary tells me every once in a while, some things that are going on with you all, and Phil, I told Gary, I said, you're a beast. I mean, like the open house, having so many people come to the open house, and now you guys are trying to move forward, I think, in creating a contract. See, like the leads that you generated from that open house, that's lead generation. The key in the process of building a listing-based business is to have a never-ending flow of listing opportunities. And beware, these listing opportunities are not necessarily going to be, oh, I want to sell my house. These are like, it's things that you identify. It's people who you identify that are possibly looking to do something. So those that are identified as, they're in the early stages, then you want to identify them and put them in the proper place in your database and work them, through the CRM. Those that are looking to actually do something right now, you want to move forward with them. They're further down the sales funnel, so you want to move further, into listing presentation mode and set in that appointment because you know they're likely to do business in the next week or so. But the key is both categories, whether they're a long time away or whether they're actually near making a decision, both of them to me are equally important because the ones that are far away from listing are the ones that in the future are going to be close to listing. And the ones that are close to listing now are the ones that in the past were far away from listing. They're all the same lead quality. The difference is when we're actually being introduced to them and then what we do to nurture them along the way. So prospecting to set appointments, lead generation on a daily basis is step number one if you're going to build a listing based business. Now, we've talked about it again. We've talked about it many times, and I will probably continue to talk about this for years and years and years. I've been talking about it for 20 years now, so I don't know why I wouldn't go for the next 10 or 15 because we know it's facts. It's the truth. So make it a ritual. The second part is pre-qualifying the lead. And here's what's important. We want to make sure that you're asking questions of your leads in order to better understand what the seller's really looking to accomplish. Now, there is a difference between interrogation and conversation. So in the area of pre-qualifying the lead, like if you look at the pre-qualifying script, it almost looks, as it reads on paper, it looks like an interrogation. So where will you be moving, and what's important about that, and what's your mortgage base, and what price, and it's almost like an interrogation because it's just a list of questions. But remember, how it reads and how we communicate it are two totally different things. We can't like write down, use this voice inflection and use this tonality in a script book. So you have to understand that even though it might look like an interrogation, your job is to make it a conversation. And the conversation is where you gather tons of information about what the seller is looking to accomplish. Like if you don't know what the seller's really looking to accomplish, you're in a very weak position to provide solutions for the seller. So if you don't know what the target is, then it's hard for you to tell them the techniques or the strategies to hit that unknown target. Because if you don't ask them, you don't know, then you don't know what to tell them. And selling is never the target. Like, I want to sell. Well, why do you want to sell? Because I want to sell. Well, why do you want to sell? Because I want to sell. Well, why do you really want to sell? Because I want to sell. That's never the way this goes. It's, I want to sell. Oh, curious, why are you wanting to sell? I want to move to Alabama. Oh, great. What's in Alabama? My kids. Oh, okay. How old are your kids? Well, there's a newborn and there's one that's 3 years old. Oh, fantastic. Wow, those are really early. And so are you going to move close to the kids in the same neighborhood? Well, my daughter's going to just build on an addition and we're going to move in with them for the first 2 years and then determine. You see, like, there's always something that somebody's looking to accomplish. Selling is not the end game. Selling is part of the process to an end game. Listing is part of the process to their end game. Then getting it sold. Listing puts them in a position to get it sold. Sold puts them into position to what? Pre-qualifying your leads is critical. You're pre-qualifying for motivation and desire, and you're pre-qualifying for ability. Motivation, desire, and you're also pre-qualifying for ability. So pre-qualifying is critical because listing gets them to the point of being able to sell, and selling gives them the ability to blank. We got to always figure out what that blank is. I think the biggest challenge in listing, in the presenting of listings, is most agents always focus on talking about the sale, and they don't talk about what's really important to the seller. And when an agent continues to talk about the sale, here's what we'll do to get it sold, here's what we'll do to get it sold, versus, you know, these are the things that we have to do to get it sold and get you to Alabama in the time that you want. See, when we keep saying to them in your communication, when you understand that they want to move to Alabama to get by their grandchildren, then no longer should you be talking about sold as the end game. The end game is Alabama and the grandchildren. So we need to make this price adjustment because we know that it gives us a better chance of getting it sold and ultimately getting you to Alabama in the time you want so you can enjoy those grandchildren. Won't that be great? Now, all of a sudden, two things happen because I'm using that type of communication. Number one is they understand that I am clear on the end result that they're looking to accomplish. In other words, I understand the game that they're playing. I understand the mission that we're on. So for me to use those words communicates that we're aligned, that we understand we're aligned in the mission, and we both know what our goals are. When I say to them in communication, and I refer to moving to Alabama and getting them closer to their grandchildren, they subconsciously understand that I have listened to what they really want to accomplish. The agent that only talks about selling, get it sold, get it sold, get it sold, it sounds like to them, hey man, this agent just wants it sold so they can get a commission. But when I'm saying, hey, we need to get it sold so we can get you to Alabama in the time frame you want so you can start, you know, enjoying these grandchildren. Now all of a sudden they say to me, or they say to themselves, subconsciously possibly, they're saying to themselves, wow, this guy really has our best interest in mind. Wow, this guy really listens. He gets us. And they will list with the agent that they feel understands them. They will list at a lower price with an agent that understands them than an agent that doesn't understand them at a higher price. I'll get the price, I'll get a better price because I've got the rapport. Somebody else could be saying $10,000 higher, but because they're only just talking about getting it sold and sold and sold and sold, the lead actually is having a different experience with me. They feel like I'm out to help them, and they feel the other person's out to help themselves. So then it sheds doubt into the conversation of, are they just telling me that high price because they just want to take the listing? Me, they're saying, you know, I mean, he's telling to put it at $5,000 less than we want because he really knows the market. He knows it's the only way that we're going to get to our grandchildren. All of this is accomplished, by the way, in the questions that you're asking. Some of you may have, that we've been in communication, some of you, if you haven't picked up by now, when you bring scenarios to me, a lot of times I'll say, why are they selling? It's like agents want to go in and start talking to me about, well, you know, okay, so the price is this and the house has got $2,200. Stop. Why are they selling? The husband has health issues. Oh, okay. Tell me a little bit more about that. And how quickly do they want it sold? What's their mortgage balance? Like, I immediately go kick into the mode that I have to have all that information before I could start advising a seller or a real estate agent on the advice that they should sell with the seller. That's how important it is to me. Pick up on that pattern when you're in communication with me, how sometimes I'll stall the conversation until I gather more information. And once I've gathered more information, then at that point is when I'll start giving you advice. Just take note of that. It's very important because I do the same thing with every seller that I talk to. If we went back for 20 years and all of my past seller files, we'll probably see a high percentage of them. I have a note there and it explains exactly why they're selling and what they're ultimately looking to accomplish. That's just something I put on every lead sheet. So pre-qualifying, you've just got to make sure that it's done. And when you're pre-qualifying, If you ask a question like, what are you looking for in the agent you choose? When you ask a question like that, and they say, well, somebody's going to be at a lower commission, what's the first thing that you hear? You probably hear, they just want to cut my commission, or they're looking for a low commission. I hear net is important to them. So be careful when you're asking questions like, why are you selling? Well, I don't know. We would just kind of like to sell. My husband's looking at potentially relocating for work. Oh, good. Has he already identified somebody? Oh, yeah, he's got his application in. It looks like he's already approved. It's like the first thing they say is like, we're kind of thinking about making a move. And then I ask another question. And all of a sudden, the application's already in. And like the moving truck is scheduled. I say, what are you looking for an agent? Well, somebody who'll do it at the lowest price, lowest commission. Okay, fantastic. So it sounds like to me, net is something that's very important to you. Like what you get in your pocket is very important. Is that what I hear you saying? Yes. I have a certain amount of money that I need to put in my pocket, or I'm not going to sell. Okay, so tell me, how much money do you have to have in your pocket in order to sell? Well, I've got to have at least $222,000. Okay, great. Well, I haven't done the research on your property yet, but I will do the research. And one thing you can count on, if I can help you get that $220,000 or more, I'll tell you. And if for some reason I believe in my heart there's no chance I can get you that $222,000, at least that, then I'll tell you. Either way, I'll be upfront and honest with you. Does that sound fair enough? And they'll say yes. Now all of a sudden, we're not really talking about commission. We're talking about net. So the key is when you're asking pre-qualifying questions, you're asking because you want to get information. You're not asking and then handling any objections at that moment. That's a big no-no. You'll never get past pre-qualifying and to the appointment if you do that. So you're asking to gather intel. You're not asking to handle objections and then handling. So you're asking questions to make your presentation stronger. We're not asking questions to eliminate appointments. So where will you be moving? When do you want to get there? When would you like to be there? What are you looking for in the agent you choose? What did the last agent not do that you wish they would have done to get the property sold? Why did your property not sell? How long have you been trying to force sell by owner? If the property fails to sell, what's plan B? Oh, I love that question. If the property failed, I'm just kind of curious, if the property was to fail to sell, what's plan B? Well, there is no plan B. We have to sell it. We thought about renting it, but last time we rented, they tore up the property. We have to sell. Like, I'm feeling better about the presentation that I'm going into. Now, why is that information important? Because what if they want to sell the property or list the property at 200, but I think it needs to be at 190? And I'm in the listing, the pricing portion of a presentation, and I can say to them, hey, look, let's talk about pricing. I know that you would like to put it on at 200,000, but as you can see with this information, $200,000 would be a list price, a possible list price, or a potential list price, but it doesn't look like it'll actually be a potential selling price, meaning the ones that have sold were all listed at 194.9 or below, and then they ended up selling right at 190. And I understand that you want to get it sold, and I know that you've even explored the possibility of renting the property, and I don't think you want to go that route because we know how much damage these renters can actually, inflict on a piece of property and how much that can cost. So, in order to prevent that situation and make sure we get you to Alabama, get you by those grandchildren, I'm going to recommend a price of 194.9. So, like having that information about reminding them of the pains associated with turning their home into a rental property and the damages that they could, have to deal with later on, and the delay that it could actually take, the way that it would delay them in getting to Alabama. Like when I combine those two things together, those are the things that get people to agree to price it more realistic. And the reason why they'll agree with me and agree to my suggestion is because they know that I know what they're going through. If I would just have said, hey, I know you want 199.9, I think you should put it out 194.9, this will get it sold. Like, sold? Okay, well, it sounds like the real estate agent's the only one that wants it sold, so they can get a commission. Greg Harrelson, real estate agent, didn't talk about getting it sold as the end game. As part of the process to prevent them from the pains of renting and to go ahead and put them in a position to experience their grandchildren. That's what pre-qualifying is all about. That's step number 2. So you got to generate, you got to pre-qualify. And then, of course, we got step number 3 is the listing presentation. And we're going to really dive into the listing presentation on some upcoming training, courses like this one. And there is a listing presentation course on the membership site that I recommend everyone get through. It's with Brendan, and he's brilliant at listing presentations. Brendan Payne, he's my partner in Charleston, but he's also an agent here in Myrtle Beach, which does, it does over 150, 160 transactions a year. I've been doing it for years. Master at the listing presentation. So I recommend you get into the membership site and participate. The listing presentation is just a game of confidence. At the end of the day, the most confident presenter will win the listing. The most confident presenter. There are people out there that'll have a lot of confidence, not even have a lot of skills, have a lot of confidence, not have a lot of, not have a good track record. But they're just great salespeople. They have a lot of confidence and they get a lot of listings because of it. Now, I don't want to be the confident but incompetent real estate agent, but the confident, incompetent real estate agent can get a lot of listings because sellers like to hire people that have confidence. Most confident presenter will win the business just about every single time. So here's where confidence comes from. Confidence comes from knowing what to say. Knowing what to say. Knowing when to say it. Knowing what to ask, but knowing what to listen for. So an example of knowing what to ask, I'm just kind of curious. I mean, why do you think the property didn't sell when it was on the market with the last agent? Well, that agent just did it, and all of a sudden I'm hearing this person like get very aggressive. Now I know they were mad at that other agent. They just never showed it. They had it listed and every other company in town came to look at the property, but that listing agent never showed the property themselves. Okay, got it. That's very, very common with expires. Somebody will get mad because they had showings, but the listing agent never actually showed it. So they assume that because the listing agent never showed it themselves, then maybe that agent was just one of those agents that's put in the MLS and forgot about it. I don't necessarily believe that that was the scenario, because we know that statistically speaking, that the majority of the time, probably 93% of the time, the listing agent will not be the same agent that sells the property to the buyer. But at least I know that that was something that they interpreted that agent did wrong. So I can go in with confidence, already knowing that information, and I can build something into my presentation that speaks to that in a way that where I exude confidence, where it becomes a non-issue. Instead of like going in blind and not knowing that information, and they said, well, how many times are you going to show it? Because that's what can happen. So like if I actually knew that that was something that kind of a sore subject for them, then before I go over, I can kind of think through that subject. And in case it comes up, I can address it with confidence. So the way this builds is step number 1, you got to generate a lead somehow. And when you get a lead, you got to qualify them, got to ask them a lot of questions. And then when you're asking questions, it gives you confidence because their answers will give you confidence. If I say to them, how did you happen to, or how, I'm just kind of curious, how high is your mortgage balance? I mean, that's the problem. I bought the property in 2007 and it's like, I just asked you for a number. But when I ask them for a number, then all of a sudden they say, oh, as if somebody just punched them in the gut and they exhaled all of their breath. This is not Greg trying to be funny. This is critical. When I'm pre-qualifying and I'm asking questions and I hear one of the questions, the answer to one of my questions, and it comes out an exhale, then I know that that's important, because that's typically where the seller feels that something they can't control is an obstacle in their way. Well, that's a problem. You know, I'm upside down on my mortgage and, you know, I'm just thinking about giving it to, you know, back to the bank. Why would you do that when there's something called a short sale? You know, but I get that information by asking questions. So listening presentation is a game of confidence. Confidence comes from knowing what to say. So you got to master your scripts and your dialogues, knowing what to listen for. So knowing if they pause, if they hesitate, there's meaning behind pauses and hesitations. You know, what do you think the property will sell for? Or what are you hoping to get for the property? You know, I mean, we had it on the market and this and that, and you know, I know what we paid for it and we've got money put. I mean, when they hesitate to answer the question in that little dialogue, that means that they want a higher price than they know they're going to get. So when I hear that, when they don't say, well, if I say, well, what are you hoping to get for the property? $200,000. And they say it like that, I'm like, okay, that, you know, that they're pretty confident in or at least confident in wanting that 200,000. But when they start to say, well, you know, and I know what we got into it, and I know this, and we did this, and we did this, and we added this, and we added that, that's them selling me as to why their price needs to be a little bit higher than the data is going to show. See, if I get that information early on when I go into the presentation, I'm already prepared. So I go in prepared, knowing that I'm going to not tell them a price. I'm going to have to show them all the different prices that have taken place in this area and have them come up to their conclusion as to what the price should be. I don't want to get into the, well, I think it's this and you think it's that and I think it's this. I say the market says it's this based on this. So how they answer gives me confidence in my presentation because I'm prepared. So listing presentations are two things. People that get a lot of listings, they have confidence. They bring confidence into the appointment, and they're prepared. Preparation, you know, have the data. Have it printed out, not in your head, have it printed out or on a yellow notepad. I actually have I write a lot of stuff on yellow notepads still. Have the data, have the CMA, make notes about the CMA, like what are some things that you've picked up, trends and patterns that you picked up by looking at the CMA, make some notes of that. Be prepared to talk about marketing, like what do you do to sell homes? Like if they ask us or they don't ask us that question, they're always listening for the answer. That's one of the questions that a lot of times they don't ask, but they're actually listening for the answer. And when we don't give them the answer, then they feel something's wrong. They default to, they don't do anything. They just want to list it at that price. Be prepared to talk about, like you should have pretty much 5 or 6 things that you can say that you do to market property. Be prepared to talk about the company track record. You know how many properties we've sold in that zip code or that area. You know, find some stat that will be attractive to them. Know what that is. You know, one of the things that you all should do more is you should talk about our Zillow budget. There's only a few people that have big Zillow budgets, you know, in the Columbia area. And you say, well, what does that matter? I don't take Zillow leads. I don't care if you take Zillow leads or not. You got to understand that if a company spends $20,000 on Zillow, then that means they get a large portion of the buyer opportunities that come off listings that are on Zillow. Their property's going to be on Zillow. There's a chance in many cases that when the person has a property listed with our competing agent, with a competing company, that it's our Zillow profile that shows up in the top 3 that are on that particular listing. So that there's a lot of times where the buyers, prospective buyers, will click to communicate with us versus the listing agent. So there's times where, like, this $20,000 budget that we're spending on Zillow is us. This is you. You are investing money. You, as part of our company, we are investing $20,000 per month, every single month, $250,000 per year, just to attract buyers off of Zillow. See, you can list a property on Zillow for free, but you got to pay to get the buyers, and we're paying to get the buyers. How many people are you going to go up against in a listing presentation that can honestly say that? So if you're confused at some of the things that you're doing from a marketing standpoint, listen, my agents, they know they are using that Zillow budget on every listing presentation because the competing agent can't say it. We can all say, well, we put it on Zillow. But very few people can say we put it on Zillow and we invest this money to make sure we're getting our unfair share of the buyer leads. And yes, I will tell somebody, it's like, look, you got so many options as who you can list with. The likelihood, though, is you list with somebody else. I'm going to be the one that's getting the buyers because I'm going to show up on your listing on Zillow anyways. So because we are actually spending a higher budget than most, so we're going to probably get the buyers, and then we're going to take those buyers and we're going to first look at my own listings, second look at the company listings. And if we don't have anything to show the buyer at that point, then we'll go into the MLS. And if your agent does a good job at promoting the property, then maybe we'll find it out of the 10,000 other properties that are there. That's the reality. Some people say, oh, that's a sales pitch. No, that's a truth pitch. It is a truth pitch. That's something you all have on your tool belt that I would bet most of you are not using. So you got to go in there. See, I can go in there with confidence because I will talk about the data. I can talk about marketing, the track record, the Zillow, and of course I have the paperwork filled out. The only thing that I have to fill out is price when I go to a listing appointment. Just a little FYI, paperwork's already filled out. I'm walking in to take the listing with that confidence. Now, I've got a lot of information. I understand what they're really looking to accomplish. I've asked these pre-qualifying questions. I'm prepared. I know the market. I know the data. I know the marketing. Now I'm walking in with confidence. Now, you walk in with confidence, there's still going to be times you're not going to get the listing. And I tell you right now, there'll be more times that you get listings because of your follow-up than because of your first presentation. I know I'd wish that it wasn't that way, but let's just face it, that's the reality of the marketplace. Follow-up is critical. The biggest loss of income is in the area of poor lead follow-up. They went on a presentation and they don't follow up soon enough, fast enough, and they don't follow up frequently enough with the right frequency. So follow-up's required, and by the way, follow-up's required in every stage. So you could prospect somebody, they don't want to set an appointment, but you know they're thinking about selling. Follow-up's going to get you the appointment. Then you go on the listing presentation, and for some reason they don't list with you at that moment, follow-up's going to give you the opportunity to take the listing. Follow-up is also a great way for you to demonstrate how well you communicate and follow up, which pays huge dividends when they're talking to other agents and one of them's doing it a lot less than you are. And understand, I would rather you not be hired because you follow up too much than not be hired because you follow up too little. Very few of you will ever tell me, well, I followed up so much, they said they'd never hire me. That doesn't happen. It's always too little follow-up that prevents us from being hired. So follow-up is critical. The last phase is this. The last stage is price reductions. See, if you want to build a listing-based business, you got to get them sold. And price reductions are important. See, the real estate market's always changing, so we have to stay on top of pricing and positioning. How it's positioned on the market, how it's priced on the market. Pricing is important. The pricing is always a snapshot in time. Listing agents find themselves in a very weak position to talk about price adjustments because they act as if that price will hold for months and months and months. Meaning, when you price a property, you're using data. And when you use that data, let's just say you print out a CMA. You print out a CMA and you look at that data. Well, that CMA is just a picture of the data at the exact moment that you printed it out. It's kind of like if you took a picture. You just took a picture, click, and you just did a CMA, okay? Now, tomorrow, if a new property's listed and you took another picture, the two pictures could look slightly different. A week from now, if a few properties went under contract, took a picture, the picture, now you got three pictures that look different. It's critical to understand in the pricing conversation that you know that pricing is nothing more than a snapshot in time. See, when you know that and you really get what I just described, picture, picture, and picture, and how all three could look different, then when somebody says to you, well, Greg, you're the one that told me $199,000 like 3 weeks ago. I said, yeah, and I still stand behind that. You know, one of the things we have to understand is pricing is nothing more than a snapshot in time. 3 weeks ago, we sat down, we looked at a CMA, we all looked at it together, and based on the picture that was painted by the market, we determined 199 was a great place to start. But now that it's on the market, and I've looked at this again and taken a new picture, I see things have actually changed. And so what we have to do is we have to adjust with the market. So pricing is nothing more than a snapshot in time is going to be a very important concept that you need to understand if you're going to build a listing-based business, because you're going to get listings and there's some of them that the market's going to shift and the price that you put it at is just not going to work. And so we don't want to be in a position where we're afraid to go back to talk to the seller about pricing. We have to be able to go with confidence and say, hey, look, I've taken a new picture, a new snapshot of the market. This is what the market's telling us. I suggest based on the market that we do this. We adjust it to 189.9. So we can get you to Alabama, get you by those grandchildren, and make sure we prevent you from having to put a tenant in this and God forbid they tear up the property. So we've got generation, prospecting to get the appointments, pre-qualifying, listing presentation, lead follow-up, and price reductions. Those are the stages. That's the listing process. Those are the 4 things that you have to do. I think it's 4 or 5 things that you have to actually master, that you have to follow in order to take people from leads to closings. So hopefully you find that information helpful. If you have any questions or whatnot, please, let me know on that. I'm going to end the recording right now, see if there is any final questions before we hang up, and then we'll go from there.